I am using a typical graphics buffer pretty much everywhere in my projects, and I couldn't decide whether or not I want to actually go through all of them and replace it with the buffered graphics object. So I went ahead and did some benchmarks to see if it was worth it, and it turns out that it is. So let's take a look at the benchmarks. So the following are averages in milliseconds of around 1,000 timed iterations. And these iterations are just consistent, and they last for about 3 minutes, and it's not too fast of a tick to cause any problems. So let's take a look at the typical graphics buffer, and this is what you will see in my video. I have a video on using typical graphics buffers, and it's basically the same what I've done in the benchmark. So this is the painting end here, just normal painting in the on paint event. I got 26 milliseconds average over at least 1,000 iterations, but it's consistent throughout these two benchmarks here. So I got 26 milliseconds painting time and 19 milliseconds painting time with the buffered graphics, along with the buffered graphics resource management. Like, it makes sure that you don't use up too much memory and stuff like that, which is cool. And so the buffered graphics paints 27% faster than the typical graphics buffer. Now let's take a look at the painting and update benchmark. So the update is just reallocating the graphics objects and whatnot and setting them up. And you do this in the constructor and the resize event and some other events if you want. So the typical graphics buffer, it took 13 milliseconds on average to set up what I was doing here. So painting and update. And the buffered graphics took 9 milliseconds. The buffered graphics collectively paints and updates 31% faster than the typical graphics buffer. And I'll show you a bit of what I was doing with the benchmark. So with this benchmark, the form just increases to 1,000 pixels, and that's just more than half my screen. And then after that, it closes and logs the benchmark to a file. After that, I run it through another program that gives me the averages. The other benchmark was simply painting a very large form. It paints these 3 grids on a very large form, and on a timer it simply paints, just calls this invalidate. I decided not to use a for loop because I didn't want to use up resources maliciously and stuff and get unpredictable results and whatnot. A little update on using buffered graphics. I decided that I don't need my buffered graphics context reassigned to every time in the update graphics buffer method, so I just do it globally up here. And also, you should be setting your maximum buffer size. So context.maximum buffer, and give it a new size. On MSDN, they add 1 to the size. I'm not so sure, maybe some sort of overflow thing, but I'm just going to do it to be safe. If you have any questions on the buffered graphics, just let me know.